Coming up, the Brooklyn Nets continue their trend of big blowout losses, this time at the hands of potential trade partner in the Oklahoma City Thunder. What do we like about Wiggins in this matchup? He might be on the trade block when it comes to getting Cam Johnson out to OKC. We dive in on it all coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Pick. Now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you place your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. And Doug, let's run our game. And that game is the Brooklyn Nets game, where they end up losing to the Thunder. This was not an unexpected result, 127-101, but it does continue this really good teams now. Brooklyn Nets, their lineups, gonna be ugly. And it was ugly early. Nets did some things that at least made it interesting for small stretches, but there was no point when we thought, watch out, OKC, Brooklyn's coming for you.
Yeah, like one of the best teams in basketball. SGA, like maybe going to win the MVP this year. They don't have Isaiah Hartenstein. He's been out for a while. No good Jalen Williams. The other Jalen Williams played, but the good one didn't play. So you're like, maybe they have a few guys out. Maybe the Nets can hang. Not really. They get absolutely dumpstered here once again. They, 127-101. It really was never close. It looked like at one point we're like, hey, are we talking like another 60-point game here? Because I think it was like 27-7 or something like that in the first quarter. And you're thinking, are we headed down are we going to need to query what the next lowest points scored in a game in the modern era is, because the Nets headed that way? And this is always the threat of what could happen with a team that wanted to go this direction, is completely undermanned when it comes to talent, punched above their weight early in the season to set sort of like maybe a unrealistic expectation about what they can do on a night-to-night basis. Not saying they can't dig deep on it, every once in a while and keep it close, a la the Lakers game the other night. But overall, these are the expectations. It's rough basketball to watch. This is what you sign up for, you eat and tank. And we could talk about sort of some individual takeaways here, including like if your opinion on Nick Claxton changed at all. My guess is no. But overall, this is probably sort of like the baseline expectation for the rest of the season, with the understanding that every once in a while it might look a little bit better. But this is just, they're playing to their talent level. Like, this is their talent level. The expectation really shouldn't be more than this.
And over the last 8 losses for them, they're averaging, and it does include the massive blowout loss, but guess what? It also includes 2 games against the Jazz. They lost by 1 point. You mentioned the Lakers game, lost that by 1 point. Their deficit margin in the last 8 losses is over 20 points. It's 20 and a half, right? And guess what? Again, massive 59-point loss. It doesn't matter because you have those 2 really close ones. And I think that's kind of standard operating procedure. Yeah, there'll be a couple here and there when maybe you play a team a little close and they have their own injuries. The Lakers game's no Anthony Davis in that one. There's no Dorian Finney-Smith in that one, right? So there's reasons. And obviously the Nets are always going to have either their own injuries or their own players that are being held out, but it doesn't matter. Like that is what this team is. They are a team that's going to be hodgepodge for most of the way. And the funny thing, when you mentioned the Lakers the other night, just to tie it to OKC, I look at these teams, and again, no Anthony Davis, but I do look at OKC and the LA Lakers in 2 completely different categories when it comes to the Western Conference. So, if you're the Lakers and you narrowly won 102-101 over the Brooklyn Nets, you're doing some real look in the mirror time, because it's the Brooklyn Nets and you're supposed to be like building your confidence there. This was basically a sleepwalk for OKC, and that's what you anticipate. So there's no, not that it matters maybe for Brooklyn in this moment, there's no moral victories here. Oh, you played the Lakers tough. Yeah, these are different stratospheres, and I think we're going to start to see more of this. The elite teams are going to knock Brooklyn's teeth in. Then there's going to be those middle-of-the-pack guys that maybe you catch them on an off night or they have injuries, and bottom feeders that you can win a couple of games here and there. But this is clearly the theme over the last 10 to 12 games for Brooklyn.
Yeah, like that again, we said this at the beginning of the year, and it kind of got proven wrong. We're about the talent level.
It was very disappointing to have things proven wrong for a little while to start the year, but now we're being proven very right.
Well, it's like one of these things where even when it was happening, I was like, are we really this wrong about this? Like, what's happening here? I know that, and I know I got, everyone kind of was quick to remind me, especially maybe you too, quick to remind me about how I've been wrong, but everything. I know I've said it too at the time, but just looking at just a holistic view of the team with their overall talent level, even when you accounted for some of these veterans playing really well, it still didn't make total sense to me. It was a hard square to circle with how they were playing so well and keeping in a lot of these games. Cause I'm like, it's just really not how usually the NBA works, right? It's like, if you watch enough basketball and follow the league for long enough, usually, this isn't the March Madness where, like, every once in a while, that scrap, 15 ranked Princeton can hang with the number 2 Kentucky, and like, we'll see what happens. If you just give everyone enough time and enough minutes and just enough games, you're going to pretty much find out like who the worst teams are and who the best teams are. And so it still never made tons of sense about like how it was happening. And I do still think we're going to look back at the beginning of that season, not regretfully, but with this, because, that actually leads me to my next point about looking at the beginning of the season, because now they're at this threshold of they've kind of gotten to the next level of bad when it comes to tank. Oh, yeah. But the next jump into the fifth, like right now they're 6th in tank odds because Portland won. The next jump into the 5th is actually kind of hard to get to. That's like 4 wins over the Hornets. And
yeah,
I think they can do it. I think the Hornets can like get 4 wins, but I'm just saying like this next thing, like moving out of this spot will take some time. And so anyway, we're kind of getting away from the game a little bit, but overall.
Yeah, well, guess what? When you lose like this, we get away from the game a little bit.
This is the other problem with following a team like this and talking about a team like this is like, you're thinking about what are the big takeaways here, right? We'll talk about Wiggins. We'll talk about some of these other players, and we'll talk about like, are we learning anything from these guys? And I think that we are at a small level, but the other problematic piece of a season like this is you run the risk of, like, what do you win when you win and what do you lose when you lose? It's like, well, I don't really know, what are we really learning about the team? Maybe there's nothing to learn. Maybe games like this against the Thunder where they get killed by 26, there aren't any takeaways except for just play the string out and get to the finish line. And it just makes for a very weird experience. So I do want to talk about some of these other guys, but anyway, long story long. It's like, this is just the tough spot that we're all in as like the team, as the content. It's just all like a very, very funny spot.
We'll get into a little bit more of this game here. Obviously, it's one where the Nets shoot just 42.5% from the field, under 28% from beyond the arc. And when you're taking 43 3-pointers, by the way, matched each other. Perfect. 87 shots overall, 43 shots from deep. Unfortunately, OKC, 44%. So that's going to be a big margin there when we talk about how you lose these games. Let's get inside the stats a little bit. Let's talk about Wiggins, who could be potentially a part of trade discussions when it comes to Cam Johnson, and so much more. All coming up here in just one moment.
All right, before we get to that, tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks. Look, basketball season's heating up. No better way to get real money action while watching your favorite stars or NBA stars than with Prize Picks. You may be a diehard fan, maybe you just like some friendly competition. Prize Picks makes it super easy, very fun to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. The way it works is just couldn't be simpler. You pick more or less than at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Maybe you think LeBron's going to drop 30 points. Maybe Luka, well, he's hurt right now. Maybe you think like Wemby's going to go more than, let's say, 30 points himself. Prize Picks lets you make your predictions, put your money where your mouth is, just 60 seconds. If you go to Prize Picks right now, we got a full slate of basketball action. We got Jalen Green, more or less than 23.5 points. Devin Booker, more or less than 27.5. No Bradley Beal. They've really had to rely on him a ton. This is how simple Prize Picks is. You just make it more or less on those numbers. And that's not just points either. Rebounds, assists, blocks, steals, every sport too. Football. They got one sport here I'd never even heard of. They had a guy on here. What's this guy's name here? Yeah, Tage Thompson. I mean, forget about it. That's how deep Prize Picks is getting into the weeds. They all to make it super fun for you. Now is the perfect time to join. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game.
All right, as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the loss 127-101 to the Thunder. Also takeaways from individual players. I got to keep coming back to Tosan. This kid, I don't know, he's putting together a nice little bit of tape for himself since he's been over to Brooklyn. And he said he's been enjoying himself, too, in his post-game interview. Before we go any further, Doug, just there's a reason why we always say get us on your podcast feed, get us on the YouTube channel. Because sometimes you want to see us visually. But this is a bad day for me. I've been rocking the dress shirt, the tie. That's been standard operating procedure. Friday is casual Fridays. But it looks like I am wearing a helmet hair of a 1970s game show host, and I can't get away from it. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know how we got here. but it's really visually. It's been upsetting me since we started the show. So I just
Your
want people
hair,
to
your
know
hair's
that.
tanked. Well, my hair already tanked and never came back, and so maybe your hair is starting to tank.
My hair's trying to tank. It's
Your hair's
considering
trying desperately to tank to start the process again. What you need to do, this is for everyone out there. You want to make your life simple. I mean, now I was forced into this situation with shaving my head, but you want to reduce the amount of choices you have to make each day around things that don't really matter that much. You shave your head. You wear black shirts. You wear black hats and black shirts all the day. Like for me, I have 50 socks. They're all the same. Like this is just make you get rid of all the decisions.
Not matching.
Yeah, there's no risk of not matching. I can't not match all my socks. I have 50 pairs of socks. They're all exactly the same. So lose them, whatever. Anyway, this is what you want to do. Make your life simple. Then you have more time to do the things you want. So anyway, that's a little
sage-like advice. And this is why I have Doug on, it's why we're on the podcast together. Sometimes you just got to reach out, ask a question. But by the way, feel free to jump in. What do I most remind you of visually today? This is something
by the way, Tage Thompson, Tage Thompson was a hockey player. Who knew? Never would never have known. I just want to let everyone in on that. So Tage Thompson,
every NHL fan throws their arms up in disgust. I think he might be a big deal too. I'm pretty sure. Knowing so much about hockey.
He could have been. I thought he was like, oh, maybe they're betting on like EA Sports or something like that. Like, this is like something like that.
He might be an e-gamer.
Anyway, now the podcast is starting to tank. All right, well, go ahead. Never mind.
Yes.
Tosan.
Let's get inside the numbers a little bit here. Yeah. So one of the other things that came out of this game, now obviously the Nets are being blown out, so you can take that for what it's worth as far as minutes that get played here. But there has been a little bit more of this trend, too, where all the starters, Zaire Williams, Noah Clowney, Cam Johnson's back in the lineup, Nicholas Claxton, D'Angelo Russell hops into the starting lineup. Nobody plays more than 28 minutes. That's Clowney. Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, they play 25. And then you get 3 players coming off the bench in Wilson, Tosan, and Tyrese Martin that all play in the 20s, plus Day'Ron Sharpe. 4 players because Keon Johnson played 23 off the bench as well and did struggle now as they take him out of the starting lineup, move him to the bench. But I do think there's a bit of a trend building here, and it kind of doesn't matter whether or not, because they were getting blown out, because they're probably going to get blown out a lot, is spreading these minutes out. It does seem like, you're going to have an 8-man kind of rotation that is all in the 20s. I don't see a lot of guys spiking deep into the 30s here as you work your way forward.
No, there's just no reason to, and especially with guys like Cam Johnson, who like the candidates that would be to play a lot of minutes, like Cam Johnson, you just have extra you're extra unincentivized to play him more minutes just because you don't want to get him hurt, right? And so if it's like going to be 26 to 29 minutes a night for him, even if the games are close or not, that's just going to be the way it's going to be. And we'll see sort of how long he sticks on the team, because rumors are going back and forth about the willingness to trade or whatever, or what the packages are. Overall, though, I think we're going to see a smoothing effect of these minutes. We'll see if we ever get some of these other guys back, like Watford, Cam Thomas. Like, these guys have been out for a long time now. I mean, it's kind of underrated that they've barely played, but
bit of a longer episode here this week on the Cam Thomas. Everything feels so relative to the tank and managing these things, but he's been out a long time. And the injuries are now kind of a part of a little part of his journey here early in his career, which is interesting to think about for Brooklyn.
Yeah, but in general, the guys that they're playing now, I think I think we have probably enough tape on pretty much everyone they have to sort of know what they are. And this is the other thing that becomes a little tricky with, watching these games on a night-to-night basis, is that while I think everyone has actually played reasonably well considering expectations, except for probably Claxton, that reasonably well considering expectation going into the season. So that's a good news. Gotten, I think, better minutes out of Zaire. I think Tosan's been a nice find, right? Tyrese Martin, I think we talked about him and said, his minutes always looked really competent. I think if you're bringing levels of competence to your minutes, which I think we did a sea of times for these guys on an individual level against OKC, the problem is it's like no one is, at the same time, no one's really flashed that, we really found something, right? Moment. I think that's the push and pull the Nets find themselves in now. So when you see these minutes, and when you're watching the game like last night, and you're like, okay, well, I know what Tosan can do. Like, he can get to the rim, he can handle the ball reasonably well. Like, he's sort of like this, I don't know, it's kind of got some Watford in him. They kind of remind me each other of how they play. Was that like a fair comp, right? Like, it just sort of like undersized to be a big, oversized and too slow to be a guard, but can also handle the ball, has decent court vision, can get to the rim. Every once in a while, we'll shoot a 3. I think we kind of know that about these guys now. And now the question becomes, watching these games is who's here for the long term. I don't think really many guys. what's there to be done in the short term except for play out the string? I don't know. Like, do you find yourself? That's why I find myself a little bit at times when watching these guys. I'm like, I think I just kind of know what's happening here, and it's not terrible. It's not terrible, but it's nothing that makes you think, oh, let's get this guy on a 3-year contract or anything like that either.
No, and that's been the interesting. I mean, I talked about Claxton a little bit on Friday when we were doing the live, just to round out some of these conversations on. Listen, yeah, of course I couched it inside of trade possibilities. Come on, calm down, guys. We know I'm going to do that, but to your point, like Zaire Williams, it's a great example of when they picked him up, and it's not a knock. He's played pretty well, but also, I don't need to be concerned about keeping him around or not, because most of the numbers, especially when talking about perimeter shooting, it's basically stayed where the career numbers are. And we kind of labeled him as, well, if you can improve this area, then we have a different conversation. Now, the one thing that's a bummer for this too is, and I'll use Tyrese Martin as the example. I think Tyrese Martin has been a success story this season. And what's nice about it is you can think, well, what if we get better talent on this roster? His role might get smaller, but he'll also stand to benefit from it. There's other players that I don't look at necessarily the same way and categorize them as, oh, yeah, but if you get the star ahead of them, watch out. Zaire Williams, I'll go back to him again. Why? Because you played on a roster that had some superstar talent on it. You couldn't seem to find a role there. So there's this weird in between with some of these players that are, hey, best suited to be on a bad team? Certainly. Bench contributor on a good team? Maybe, right? So that's, I think, where we're starting to pigeonhole these guys down. And the bummer for me is probably that there's more guys that fall into the not going to be a part of it than could be a part of it category. That's what's been, and that's always me, younger players, but that's the disappointing part, I think, to this point in the season, where I go, yeah, put them in the thanks for filling out the minutes, but we're probably not going to see you here maybe next season, let alone a full 2 seasons from now when you really start to fill out with those draft picks.
Yeah, you kind of phrased it like the way that I was probably trying to phrase it, which was that, like, these guys are all just sort of placeholders, right? Like, and I think the hope was, would the Nets find more than just placeholders out of this season? Like, how many of these guys would be able to really pop? Now, again, maybe everyone just gets driven down a little bit. When the talent level gets driven down for everyone, it's really hard to really, maybe it's a chance to stand out, but it's also hard to just be really good on a game-to-game basis. But then you kind of look at, like, sort of where these guys land. Like, if you look at Zaire, he's basically just exactly the same guy that he was in Memphis. Like, down to almost the percentages, right? Yep. It's slightly better, but nothing that would make you think, oh, they really stole one. Now, I think he's been great defensively, and he's a guy too. I'm like, okay, he's so good defensively that I probably just that he probably could just stick. Like, it's good to have guys like this around that could just defend, basically every position. So he's one I would still say, let's keep going, because I think he's just so good in that one piece of the ball, and just is, I guess, competent enough with everything else. But yeah, the hope, I think, was that, oh yeah, like, one of these guys is going to be in term for a longer term deal at some lower money or something like that, and the Nets will feel really good about having this situation. And they've had lots of guys like this we've thought this about, right? Watford was a guy we thought this about too. I think Zaire we thought about coming into the season. I mean, Tosan, I don't think it's going to happen, but he's played well.
I'm thinking about it now.
Yeah, kind of. Tyrese Martin. Like, but again, you couch it correctly when you said, well, this is also on a bad team, right? Like, this is like, so the comparisons are bad, right? It's like, okay, well, are they competent compared to the rest of the guys? Well, yeah, but the whole team stinks. So, right. So what are we really doing here? And that was, again, it just gets very, very tricky. The OKC game highlights this completely. It's like, no one plays terribly. They're just completely outmanned. And it's just too hard of a situation.
Coming up here in a second, and I agree with you. Like, it's just too hard it's too hard of a situation to not only evaluate these guys on a higher level about what they can mean for the team long term, but also just on the very basic level, shooting a good percentage in a game when you're losing by 20, 15, 20, 25 points all night. It is watered down, because guess what? The opposition isn't as concerned about defending you when they know the win is in the bag. Coming up here in a second, though, the Brooklyn Nets obviously have this little player called Keon Johnson. The Oklahoma City Thunder are a trade candidate, but I'm going to go sneaky here. Combined 51 points for SGA and Isaiah Joe. We should ask for one of them in the trade package. We'll get into that here to close things out in just one moment.
All right, first, going to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. And man, this weekend of NFL action was absolutely awesome. Right now, new customers give out $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel app's super easy to navigate. So many bets to keep the game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. You're not going to wait around for those winnings. Maybe you're betting on your favorite team, just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the Thunder 127-101 victory over our Brooklyn Nets, but then also some players inside of it. So, listen, I don't think we're getting Isaiah Joe. And by the way, in 29 minutes, SGA 8 of 14, gave you 27 points, 10 assists, 4 steals in this one. Isaiah Joe only played 22 because he went 8 of 10 and 8 of 10 from beyond the arc and had 24 points. A little trivia game for you, Doug. We always love to play this with the Brooklyn Nets. Can you name the one player that had a positive plus-minus for the Brooklyn Nets?
That dramatic pause was not because for drama. I actually had my mic muted. So I'm going to walk you through this. I had my mic muted. I made the guess, which no one's going to believe me now, though. I'm going to keep this in the video. Don't cut it out because you're going to see me say, if you read my lips, you're going to see me say Reese Beekman. And then, because the whole thing I said was, I'll walk you through this. This is good podcasting. I said, he had to be off the bench. And then I was thinking whoever played at the end. So I was like, oh, it had to be Beekman. And then you're going to see, I looked over and I confirmed that I was correct. So you're only going to believe it if you watch the video. You're only watch the video for it because you'll see me say it. Anyway.
I admit I'm wrong. I got it right. You are well aware. In his 5 minutes of action, Reese Beekman, 1 for 1, 1 of 2 at the line, gave you two. Listen, hold on here. Just point stop. This is why he is a positive in the plus minus. In just 5 minutes of action, he was 1 of 1 from the field, 1 of 2 at the line with 2 assists and a steal in the game. I mean, Reese Beekman, extrapolate that out over 25 minutes. The guy's crushing it on a night in, night out basis. And that is typically the case. The guys that play less end up looking better. And I will say, in a game that you lose by 26 points, when you have 25 minutes of action for Keon Johnson and he is only a -6, that is a massive victory. And he is, of course, the big centerpiece talking about these trades and talking about OKC. And I've discussed this on Friday when I did the live. OKC, as we said before, is such a perfect suitor because they got young talent. They got a bunch of picks. It's whatever you want. What do we have to do to make this happen? Did you see, though, as we're not going to get SGA or Isaiah Joe out of the deal, what did you see from Dang or from Wiggins in terms of them being potential pieces? As we know, we say we want Topic in the deal, but if that's not a part of the deal, do these guys move the needle for you in a meaningful way? If you fast forward, they get it's one of the top draft picks, they fill out the roster, and this guy is a part of it. He's looked at as the number 3 on the roster in the short term, the number 2 on the roster in the short term.
I mean, Wiggins definitely not, only because he's just too old, right? So I would just say for him, he's 26 now. Like there would be no, what's the point, right? Like it's just he's fine, competent rotation guy. Would probably start for the Nets right now, but what's that really tell you? I think that like for him, it's mostly just an age thing. I'm like, I just don't know why they
blink
would
of an
do
eye.
it,
he's
right?
28 years old now. The Nets are, whatever. And you're like, okay, where are we on this guy for sure?
With Dang, post hype top 10, he was a pick 11, yeah. Right? So, post hype kind of lottery guy that never really worked out. He's a little different because he's still so young at 21. I'm not sure we've gotten like enough tape to really know. Nothing really has jumped off. Like he's the efficiency for a guy this size is horrible, right? Like 40% from the field, 28 from 3. Like he just can't make any baskets. But something made it worth it when they were first picking him, And so back in 22. And so that one's like a little different because if the Nets are still like in this post hype train with the idea that like 1 out of every 6 will hit, and then but 5 of the 6 won't. I think that's an okay line of thinking to take. It's just that for sure I'm going to self-exclude everybody on age. If you're over 23 or 24 at this point, I just don't know why the Nets would like really be bothering unless you were just awesome. But that's just not what we're talking about here.
And it's funny too because the Nets have a guy like Keon Johnson a little bit later in the first round, but we talk about a lot of these guys, former hype guys. They've been in the league for a little bit. How much run have they had, and what do we think about them? So these guys fall in the category, and they mentioned that with Dang. It's funny that he's been in the league for 3 years, not massive sample size, but has played. So when we talk back about Topic, we're always like, well, we want him. Why? Well, because he's the unknown. Because I don't have any sample size on him. So it is funny to me that it always defaults to, well, I'll take the thing if it isn't an absolutely explosive sample size. Give me the unknown commodity. Give me more of that possibility or that potential. Because in a lot of these instances, like you mentioned, I don't know, should it matter that when you look at those stat lines and the perimeter shooting for Dang, yeah, it gives you at least pause to go, is he going to get there? And even though he is so young, it's still 3 years in the league. He's still been around. And by the way, a winning basketball team over the last few seasons, right? So like you are talking about a team that has enough high-end talent on it, clearly has superstar talent on it. So you should be one of the biggest benefactors of it. And you're kind of okay. Take him, put him on the Brooklyn Nets roster right now. What do those numbers look like? What kind of player is he if he plays for the Brooklyn Nets this season among the Zaire Williams, the Claxtons, the Clownies, and everybody else they have going on here? I think we'd be talking about him in the same boat we just did. Yeah, maybe he'll be around or maybe he won't, and it's not really going to matter in the long term.
Well, do you think your efficiency is going to get better on a team that's 50% worse? Like something like there's just no
math on that.
That math doesn't work. Like you can't get more efficient on a team that has unbelievably worse players than SGA and Jalen Williams and these guys, and then the Thunder. If you can't be efficient on the Thunder, especially this version of it, I mean, it's going to be really, really hard to do it. But so that's where you maybe you get extra points to get, you deduct extra points for situations like that where it's like, I forget the team we talked about. Oh, maybe it was like the Pistons a while ago. It's like, okay, well, if you didn't work out on the Pistons, I mean, did we learn a lot? The Pistons stink.
Right.
Yes, and so they
as opposed to we talk about the Warriors. We talked about them too, right? When young players on the Warriors don't work out, you go, well, is it development? You're playing with superstar guys. Like there has to be
but then you have enough of them that don't work, and you're like, well, what is it here too? So I think with the Thunder though, and the Thunder haven't been absolute, all hits. Like right, they drafted Poku, he's out of the league, but he's out of the league, and so I just don't. I guess I would count it more against you if you can't make it work in this situation because they have a great coach, they have a great organization, and if it's not working with them, it's hard to imagine to squint and see it working somewhere else. As opposed to, we didn't work out with the Hornets. It's like, it could be a Hornets problem. We'll see, right? Like that's kind of where I land.
And the interesting thing about that, just to tie a bow on this game, the Nets lost, and you mentioned Portland won. So the tankathon odds, you got to figure it out and get in top 5. That's that big difference in terms of the percentage boost that we want to see for Brooklyn. The closer for me here is when you look at a game like this and you think about the Keon Johnson trade, there are less players on OKC from a young talent standpoint that I want put into the mix than maybe I previously thought, right? It's kind of, maybe for me it is either it's Nikola or I really don't care about these other guys. So all the salary matching in the world, it's cool to get them and within reason, right? Guys that the Thunder are going to put in the table. And now you start talking about those picks. So when you hear, as we'll do a full episode again on it later this week, when you hear Brooklyn wants 2 first-round picks, but the players matter a little bit here. Thunder can afford to give that third if that's what it takes. And these are going to be later first-round picks as well. As we always say, picks are not created equally. The Thunder are going to be putting out some late draft assets. Interesting to see how that shapes up as we move towards the deadline next month.
All right, we're going to get out of here. Much appreciated, everyone that's going with us this season. Look, the Nets are in the tank. We're not tanking. Podcast every single day.
With this hair? 5 days I couldn't possibly.
Yeah, the hair's in the tank, but nothing else. All right, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Nets wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube so you can see what Adam was struggling with today.
Here's the thing about hair. I think most people think that I have Lego hair, like I can just take it on and off in one piece. And that's not quite the case, although it's pretty close. And that is Pete Wentz.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Down, going down, baby. Basketball, yeah.